Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Fighters Block. I am your host, Jesse Rivas, being joined by my partner as always, Mr. Joe Gilpin. Say hello to the folks.
Hello, folks. How's everybody doing? How you doing this week, Jesse?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I love the representation there with the AEW. Big fan of professional wrestling, so used to be a professional wrestler. Boom.
Yeah, you should talk about that more on stage. Stop. That was just an excuse to get you to flex. God damn it. We're fucking less than 60 seconds into this show, and you're already wearing a tight-ass shirt. Look at this motherfucker with his tight-ass shirt. The best, by the way, if you ever need to, get a big laugh at a comedy show, just say that. Just point at an audience member and say, look at this motherfucker in his tight-ass shirt. Tight-ass shirt wearing motherfucker. Everyone, it'll crush. It'll crush. I guarantee it. Man, we saw a great lessons you learned from the Kings of Comedy. We saw a great weekend of fights last week, Jesse.
Dude,
that was a fucking good weekend of fights.
The week prior was the beginning of fight season, right? We started seeing all the fights being booked and everything looks good going all the way up into the summer. But yesterday was, or better yet, this past weekend was the one that really got me excited. Man, we could start wherever you want. The MMA, the boxing.
How do we not start with Berchelt and Valdez, right? To me, that was the biggest thing of the weekend. That was the biggest fight of the weekend. And it ended up probably being the best performance of the weekend. And it had a lot of competition for that. This was a great weekend of boxing. A lot of times we come on here and we talk about great fight in MMA. MMA won the weekend. To me, boxing won the weekend for sure. UFC kind of punted, like this wasn't the strongest card for sure. But holy fuck, Oscar Valdez.
Jesus. Oh my God. So going into the fight, I think you gave Valdez a way better shot than I did. I was with the general media that said
I gave him a better shot than everybody.
Yeah, you did.
There's another one where I feel like I'm on a little bit of a heater. I ultimately did pick Berchelt though, so I don't fully credit myself for it.
Going into have more balls. This was a Berchelt fight to win. We thought Berchelt was too big. We thought he was in his prime. And we thought that Valdez may have been a little bit damaged after getting his jaw broken against Scott Quigg. But in this fight, we got to see everything that they had promised us with the move to the Reynosos. They had been with the Reynosos now, who's Canelo's trainer in his training camp, for a couple of fights now, but we haven't seen exactly what was promised in the move. And they said, hey, this is a work in progress. And this was the fight. This is the big fight that showcases. This is actually his first step-up fight, if you really think about it. He's beaten the gatekeepers. He's beaten the lower-level champions. Berchelt is like that first signature victory that kind of lets the world know, hey, this is a world-class motherfucker.
A couple weeks ago, or whenever the Ryan Garcia step-up happened, we kind of talked about what it took to make something a step-up fight. Miguel Berchelt was one of the best fighters under 150. This is not a step up. This is just the test.
No, you know what? I'll take it back. This was a test because Scott Quigg was a past his prime, lower weight class guy who moved up to fight him. He was a tough veteran, but no, this was the fight. He just leaped into the fight. So I take that back a bit.
Yeah.
How did you see this? How did you feel like this either change your opinion of Valdez or change your opinion of Berchelt?
So a couple things. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk nice about Oscar Valdez. Oscar Valdez came in. His speed looked incredible. I thought his ability to turn Berchelt all night looked great. I think his work with Eddie Reynoso is obviously paying off. I don't think there's any debate. Something horrific or maybe even amazing would have to happen. Something would really have to change for Reynoso to not be trainer of the year at this point.
Or in February. Right? We're talking about this in February.
Straight up. And he showed great power. A lot of people are saying we can talk about the stoppage in a minute, maybe. It almost couldn't have gone better for Valdez. And I would say this skyrockets him up to maybe as high as number 2 in the world, only behind Gervonta Davis, who is probably leaving the division pretty soon anyway. Speaking of leaving the division soon, this might be the last time we ever see Berchelt at 130 pounds because he looked rough on the scale. He looked rough when he got in the ring, and he didn't have a lot of fire until he had already really taken a whooping. This was not, we were kind of promised a war of two guys coming together with some spectacular violence. Valdez held up his end of the bargain. Miguel Berchelt did not. Jesse, do you feel like COVID might have had a role to play here? Because Berchelt did have to pull out of their first fight with COVID, and he comes into this fight and he just looks drained from the beginning in a way that he's never been. He's always been Mr. Consistency. Do you feel like that might have played a part? It's a little awkward guessing because we don't know like his medical history.
It's so difficult to guess these kind of things. Is it an amazing performance by Valdez? Did he do something that was just a perfect game plan against a guy who he's known since he was in his early teens? Or was it that Berchelt finally, he's 30 now. He's been at this weight class now since he was in his early 20s. Did he finally reach that part where his body matured to the point where it just can't cut the weight anymore? And we've seen that. I don't think we will ever really be able to tell because honestly, after that knockout and that destruction, I don't know if we're ever going to see the same Berchelt again.
We don't ever see it, right? It's very rare that we'll ever see it. There's guys that are able to overcome being knocked out in that way. But even like Manny Pacquiao's career suffered from the Marquez knockout. You know what I mean? Which is kind of what I would put this up to. Maybe not that. It's not quite the same because this was more of a destruction leading up to it. And the Pacquiao Marquez thing was just more of a shock. But this was an absolutely vicious knockout. And we talked about Reynoso maybe locking up trainer of the year here in February. That probably, think about what would have to happen for that not to be knockout of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a fight that caliber, a guy overperforming that much, fight with a lot of drama behind it. I mean, it would really take something pretty special for Oscar Valdez not to be top 2 at least when it comes to knockout of the year.
No, I completely agree with you. I think that's a phenomenal performance. But I will say that my concern for Berchelt, and I think everyone's concern when the knockout came from Berchelt, a lot had to do with the referee. When the first knockdown happened, it was a standing 8 count. I believe that we no longer in a world where standing 8 counts are a thing. Valdez was giving him an ass whooping that he never recovered from. And you could have salvaged the fighter by stopping it right there. Just let him get a couple of more punches in and then stop it because it wasn't going to get any better. And what we ended up seeing was something similar to what happened to Junior Dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez, where that was a life-changing ass whooping where I can't think of a fighter who's come back from that.
It's really difficult. These guys pay such a huge price, and it's a lot every single time, right? We see fights where guys leave parts of themselves in there, and we saw it right there with Miguel Berchelt. Even if he comes back and he's good, part of himself was left there. You can't take that kind of ass whooping without leaving something behind. And that's part of what makes this sport beautiful. It's also a part of it's part of what makes being a fan of this sport so difficult sometimes, right? Is because you have to reconcile with that. It's difficult to say, with Miguel Berchelt, when he comes back, how is he going to look and what's it going to be up to? Do you think he comes back at 130 or do you think he comes back at 135?
He has to come back at 135. I just can't see him making that weight anymore. And man, honestly, man, if he told me I called it quits, I would actually kind of be happy because I just honestly don't see him being able to perform at the same level again. But you know what? I've been surprised. Alistair Overeem had a lot of knockouts that he came back from. Jorge Linares, he got knocked out most of the 2000s and came back into the 2010s to have a good second act of his career. So you never really know. But I would like him to take a full year off like Manny Pacquiao did after the knockout of Marquez. But the thing is, I don't know if he's at the financial position that Pacquiao was to take a year off. I don't know if he's made that much money. So going forward for him, I would love to see him in a higher weight class and hopefully take a couple of soft touches on his way up.
I agree. I would love to get him on the who's homeboy. It's kind of maybe a bad example now because he got knocked out by
Jerry.
No, I was going to say the guy who got knocked out by Gervonta Davis in his last fight.
Oh, yeah. Santa
Cruz. Take that nice Santa Cruz path where you just knock out, just trash can after trash can for 2 years. I mean, for real, at a certain point. I do want to push back about something around the stoppage, and then I want to ask you about the corner and if they should have stopped it. But I didn't see it as a bad 8 count in, what was it, the 5th, the 6th, something in there?
Yeah.
Whenever he did knock him down, I think it was the 4th. Same round as Warrington, by the way. Interesting. When he did knock him down, if the ropes weren't there, he would have fallen. In that case, I believe the referee is supposed to intervene.
Okay.
And call that as a knockdown. You can't like be literally just held up against the ropes. If you're standing against the ropes and they're going in, then you can't do anything. But if they're falling and the ropes happen to catch them as they're falling, then the referee is supposed to intervene.
Okay, so he's supposed to step in. I thought it was a judgment call, but
it wasn't a judgment call. It's exactly what the referee was supposed to do that night.
Okay. Where do you see Valdez go here? Let's go through the weight. Let's go through the weight class.
2 serums in 1 with 21 potent plant extracts, including turmeric, in 7 days.
Excuse whatever noise that is. I have.
And more radiant.
Excuse, I'm digging on it. No, Oscar Valdez. Where should he go next? So the guy who was sitting ringside, was he sitting ringside? He was at least calling him out as loud as he could and saying, "We need to make this happen. It's in house." There's a lot of things that make this fight look like it's next and look like it's going to be a big deal, and that's Valdez versus Shakur Stevenson, right?
Yeah.
So, Stevenson, did you pull up a porn window and get distracted? Are you agreeing? What's going on?
No. I'm agreeing, but I'm not trying to cut you off at the same time.
It should be Shakur.
Yeah. No, it should definitely be Shakur Stevenson porn window. It should definitely be Shakur Stevenson because they're in-house. Most of the fights that I want to see Valdez fight, unfortunately, are over at another network. Last week, we saw Jojo Diaz fight, and he didn't necessarily look as good, but I would have been interested in that fight. Tevin Farmer's on that side as well. Jamel Herring is someone who could possibly fight him in here. But, man, it just seems like the way that this new generation is elevating. You got the Teofimo Lopez's, the Ryan Garcias, the Devin Haney's. The Shakur Stevens is the guy who's kind of being left behind. And I think this is the perfect fight. Valdez now elevates to the number 1 guy in this weight class. Shakur Stevens has been knocking at the door to become a major player. And, yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. I think that should be the next fight.
Straight up. We were supposed to see in this division Jamel Herring this weekend, but that fight got pulled. So we're going to not have as much clarity as I was hoping for coming out of this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, that's
it sucks. What are you going to do?
Carl Frampton in this weight class, but I'm not really too sure where Frampton lies now that since he lost to Warrington, I don't know if I still view him the same way as the guy who beat Leo Santa Cruz all of 5 years ago now.
Right. It makes sense. And that's a long time in one of these divisions, man, especially, like 130. 5 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Look back at the rankings, 5 years ago, and you tell me how many of those dudes are still around.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking about dudes who might have hit their peak 5 years ago, Jesse, do you want to talk about Broner?
One time considered the heir apparent to the throne of Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather and the Cottos. Broner was considered the number 1 blue chip prospect 10 years ago, but that was 10 years ago. Now he's 31 years old, which is very young as a fighter, but he's already washed up. He's broke. As he said in the interview, he had $13 coming in, and now he's got like $3 million going out, but he owes a bunch of people. So really, he's still got $13. Fighting against the unheralded Giovanni Santiago from Puerto Rico with 14 fights, who took a whopping 5 years out of boxing at a point in his career to pretty much outbox Adrian Broner in this fight. What did you see?
I saw it exactly the same way. I thought Santiago, through sheer activity, through a much more varied attack. I mean, people are talking about how we can get into the Steve Farhood stuff in a minute, but Farhood on the broadcast, he gave it, to Santiago by a round. I thought that was insane.
Yeah, that was
I thought to just see it as a fit. I had it like 117 to 110. I straight up thought, Broner won 2 or 3 rounds, and I could see less than that. But the fix was in all night. We knew it from the outset that it's been rare since I've seen one this straight up blatant. They gave him the first round. Broner landed a grand total in the first round, 0 punches, not 1. And the judges gave him that round.
You got to score defense, man.
Apparently. Scoring defense is, by the way, a great way to tell me, no, I don't know what I'm talking about. I straight up just say things that I am like 20% sure what they mean, and I have no idea. Like, that's what, but you have to score the defense means. No, it means that you already had an idea walking in who was going to win, and you will backfill however you need to make that work.
Man, it was a shame. And it's funny because the color commentators kind of gave you like that wink of he's landed more punches, but you gotta see if the judges are giving him credit for the body shots, or they giving him credit for the jabs, or they giving him credit for like activity, for landing, for winning the fight, because they were kind of like hinting like we can't say the judges are crooked, but there's a robbery in place. I hope you guys watching know, wink, wink. And that's exactly what we got. The commentators knew, we knew watching the fight, and so did Santiago's corner, because even though we felt he was winning, they still told him, you got to knock him out. You have to knock him out to win. And when they announced the robbery, he wasn't even that upset. He was like, yeah, I knew.
I mean, Showtime paid for this, which made it all the funnier, by the way, that then Broner gets on the mic afterwards, and he's mad that some people thought he underperformed. He got outlanded by 100 punches. He's yelling at Showtime, saying Showtime didn't believe in me. Buddy, they just bought your victory. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. They didn't believe in you because they paid for you to be standing in the winner's circle there that night. And he's, at the same time, he pops off, and we can talk about his post-fight interview. Did anyone expect anything else? I mean, straight up, did you expect a new version of Adrian Broner? This is exactly pace for pace all week what I expected. I never believed he was going to come in at 140. I was surprised he made 147 to a certain extent. He comes in, he doesn't throw nearly enough punches. He's super inactive like he has been every single fight for the past, 7 years at this point. Fucking forever. And he goes and he has some insane post-fight speech where I can't understand half the shit he's saying, and the other half that I can understand makes me cringe.
The post-fight interview, I feel like he always has to create some type of controversy. He's known for that in a very Derek Lewis way. He gets rewarded for bringing controversy. But one of the ways that this fight was sold was that Broner is a draw. I remember watching AEW, which you actually have in your head there, and every other commercial was AT&T telling you to upgrade to Showtime because Adrian Broner's fighting this weekend. Get the fight for free by upgrading to Showtime. I saw a ton of commercials about that throughout watching TV this past weekend. And all of it was building up for the big fight. And then when the fight actually happened, didn't it draw like, 1/4 or 1/3 of what he usually draws?
It drew little over 280,000 people. Those are horrible numbers.
Yeah.
Those are horrible numbers. That's a third, roughly, of what he usually does. He's usually honestly, he's usually cracking 800,000 to 900,000. And this time he came in under 3. You remember that fucking awful, we still talk about it sometimes, Terrence Crawford versus Postal.
Oh, yeah.
Basically nobody bought it. It did like these numbers. You know what I mean?
No, it still did worse. They did like
20,000. Yeah, that was unbelievable. That was literally just like, these are the people who no matter what will buy a boxing pay-per-view. The writers, the journalists, like those kinds. No, but the numbers for this.
What's sad about that is like, have you ever done a show where you're like telling all your friends and family to show up and literally no one shows up to the show, and you're like, really? Not even my friends showed up to the show?
No, that's never happened to me. I've never asked my friends or family to come to one of my shows. Every time it's like a bringer show, I'm always just like, oh, crazy, they didn't pop in. Man, wild. So, yeah, it comes to where were we with all this? Broner being dumb, being himself, being all this. And where does he go next? He's going to pick another fight with a guy who they are going to buy a win off of, right? That's what it looks like.
He owes the head of Showtime money. So they're going to work him. And
imagine owing a billionaire money. I would literally be like, no. How about that? How about you're good and I need to be good too?
Yeah, so basically he needs to win for the head of Showtime to get his money back from Broner.
Yeah, it's a very shell game kind of thing. So yeah, no, they're going to keep booking him for wins. He's probably, he's talking about 4 fights this year. There's no way that's going to happen. Maybe 3. Probably he'll get one more fight in this year.
He technically lost to a guy who's not in the top 50. How will he do against someone in the top 30?
Oh, straight up. Like, imagine putting him in with like Who's an up and comer?
We don't even know the top 30. We know the top 10.
Bro, imagine if they put him in there literally with like a Jerome Boots Ennis. Like how ugly that would get fast. Within 2 rounds, it would be just like a mauling. You know what I mean? I don't know where he could possibly go. He's not relevant anymore, and I feel like I've already talked about him too much.
We did talk about him too much. Let's move on to someone that we should be talking about. Wow, what a performance. The man who retired, Sugar Shane Mosley, came back to defend the European title against a young upstart, Josh Kelly. Fantastic fight. What did you think?
I love this fight. This is the best fight of the weekend, right? Like Berchelt and Valdez was like a good fight for the drama, and there was a lot of action, but it was a lot of one-way traffic, right?
It was a performance. It wasn't a fight.
Exactly. This was a motherfucker of a fight. Josh Kelly and David Avanasian went to a fucking brawl, baby. They were all over each other. Josh Kelly, we said it during the fight, man. It looked like he knew how to box, but he liked to get in that brawl. And he liked to get in that brawl a little bit too much. And I think Avanasian, as the more experienced guy, was better about drawing that out of him and then picking his spots within there to do big damage. And he did. And he did a lot of great work on that inside. Whereas early on, Josh Kelly was real flashy on the outside, moving, doing a lot of beautiful shoulder movement, head movement, all that. But Avanasian, man, found the pathway to victory and just never stopped spamming that button until he figured it out.
Man, I hope this is a great lesson for Josh Kelly because I feel like he has a lot of potential. He looked phenomenal. It was a very much kind of like a young Jorge Linares, where Linares was a phenomenal boxer, but he loved brawling with those Mexicans. And then he would get knocked out. And it was like, bro, stick to what brought you to the dance. You're a very good boxer. Stick to that. Josh Kelly did that. When he was boxing, I mean, when he was in the zone, he was moving. He had great defense. He was controlling him with the jab. Avanasian kept stuffing his punches and trying to break the distance, luring him into a fight, successfully bringing him into a brawl. And then that's a world where David Avanasian has kind of made his name. You know, he goes in there. He's very tricky with the inside brawling. And that was the big difference. Man, it was what did you think of the stoppage?
I like the stoppage. Well, it was the corner thrown in the towel. So ultimately, you have to trust that they're doing the right thing. I thought it was a great stoppage because he wasn't just hurt, he was going to get finished, right? Yes. The only thing that was going to happen next was more punishment, more hurt. And you know that part of him had to be sitting there thinking like, man, we just saw what happened to Warrington. We just saw that he took too much damage, broke his jaw, and really fucked his career. And I absolutely applaud his coaches, Josh Kelly's coaches, for prolonging the life of the competitive life of their athlete by making sure he didn't take too much damage. We're sitting here saying about Berchelt. I didn't know this, but when it came to the Berchelt fight over the weekend, apparently he was telling his corner after the 9th in Spanish, like, you know, basically no mas. Guys, I'm in trouble here. I'm not feeling this. Really? Or no, before the 9th. After the 8th, before the 9th, I think. One of the two. So somewhere in there, apparently he told his corner in Spanish, like, hey, this is not okay. It was not. And so I'm never going to get mad when a corner especially throws a towel. I'm not that guy. If they think it's too much, it's too much. I agree with them. But, man, some real just strategic errors by Josh Kelly, right? It wasn't technique. It wasn't his hands were slow. There was nothing wrong except for the shit he decided to do.
Mm-hmm. For Avanasian, do you see him going back to the world stage, or do you think he's just going to be a strong European fighter at this point?
I would like to see him dip back up once into the lower world stage. I think that this is a really tough European level test, and he passed it as well as you could have hoped. You know, in a lot of ways, he got the stoppage. He was able to impose his fight on a younger, less experienced guy. And the times before where he stepped up, he's had decent enough performances, right? Where he went in against Lamont Peterson, he went the full distance, you know, and it's been a few years. Let's see him back. I know he went against that Green Machine guy and got stopped. That's a different story. But I still think that there's room for him to still get in an opponent here at this weight class that can kind of test him, or could at least that guy could help make his name off of a guy like David Avanesian. He's now got a ticket that a lot of these young cats want. They want to beat an Avanesian.
Yeah, he holds the gate now. He's definitely, I mean, to us as the gate, I know in Europe, the European title means a lot. Like, that's big. You get the British title, the Commonwealth title, the European title, the German title. In America, that's still the gate. Like, we only view you from the world level and above. But he holds that gate down pretty tight. So I love his position where he's at now. I want him to continue there and make a lot of money fighting all these young prospects all across Europe. So I look forward to it. UFC action this weekend.
No,
What a knockout. We talked about knockout of the year with Berchelt versus Valdez. Where does this rank up in knockout of the year? We got Curtis Blades versus Derek the Black Beast Lewis.
Derek the Black Guy fucking my mom Lewis. I thought so in terms of like concussive effect, that was a lot of knockout, right? That was actually a little bit, honestly, man, and they happen pretty close to each other. The Curtis Blades getting knocked out and Miguel Berchelt getting knocked out was kind of a 1-2 punch of like, that's a little too much. You know, I really was not the biggest fan of either. But Derek Lewis, he threw that giant bus driver uppercut, you know, just really brought it. He looked like Dave Chappelle in the Bia sketch. And just fucking like lifted him off his goddamn, it lifted his soul out of his body with that uppercut. I felt for Curtis Blades, man. I thought he was being the way superior fighter. You know, he looked great. There was nothing else I would have changed. He just got hit with an uppercut that heavyweight sucks. Heavyweight sucks. Like, the better guy will just straight up lose, like, at least 30% of the time. You know what I mean?
Like when you become really good at video games and then you let your little brother play and he's just smashing buttons and he still beats you.
Yes, exactly. There's no like, yeah, I'll do that in like UFC video games where it's like you're literally just throwing head kicks. That is not what Georges St. Pierre does. All right, do this fight like how the guy would. You know what I mean?
Yeah, way better boxer. I mean, way better wrestler, way better MMA fighter.
I mean, he was boxing way better. If we want to call him the better boxer, I'm not going to outright disagree with that.
But man, the power of Derek Lewis, the Deontay Wilder of UFC.
Deontay is exactly how I feel with Deontay, except it's almost even more frustrating because there's like even more weapons that he's not using.
Yeah.
And I know, you know, okay, he's got, I feel like my camera's going in and out of focus nonstop. I feel like Derek has tools that he shows. He has some decent kicks. He has abilities that he doesn't bust out every fight. I don't think he was busting them out at all in this fight. It's just a fucking frustrating thing to watch sometimes. I love the guy. I really love the guy. I really, like, on a personal level, I think he's a funny guy. I think he's a really nice guy. I think he's a really generous guy. I think the story of him beating the shit out of 3 members of the Ku Klux Klan is really cool. And I wish more fighters did shit like that. I'm sure many more would if they came across it. But man, it just, you know, I came away from that fight, honestly, feeling rough for Curtis Blades that he got knocked out so bad in a fight where he was doing so well. That was my takeaway. That's what I felt.
He now becomes what, the #1 contender? He's the next guy, right? So it's Stipe versus Ngannou. The winner of that gets John Jones. Does he sit out? Because he's obviously the next in line for the winner of John Jones and the winner of the next UFC heavyweight fight.
So it depends. Could they have him sit on the sideline and have him do that? Yes. If they wanted to put the promotional dollars behind it, certainly they could. If they want to kind of keep the machine gears rolling and even potentially welcome a new heavyweight to these top rankings, they'll pair him with Cyril Gane after Cyril Gane beats the shit out of Rosenstruck this weekend.
Ooh, you talked about this being a bad division. You talked about this, you know, about the new blood coming in. We had some new blood on the undercard that they promoted. It was veteran versus new guy. You want to talk about those 2 fights?
I'd love to, and I actually predicted both of these finishes, which I was happy about. I should have bet some money on it. I would have won something. But no, my dumbass, I would have parlayed it with Blade, so who gives a shit? Chris Dawkins, Philadelphia native, good hands, good speed, good combinations. Puts out Alexei Olenek, his 3rd straight stoppage in the UFC. I believe all in the first round. And then Tom Aspinall submits Andrei Arlovsky after hurting him in the first round. I thought his was ultimately even more impressive, to be honest. Both guys, Aspinall and Dacus, Aspinall being the Brit, they are young, they're hungry, they are top 15 to top 20 already. And these are the kind of guys who can finally, I feel like, start to help push out some of these older generations.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Whereas some of these older cats, like, I don't know, I don't want to put Arlovsky out there, but he did just lose to one of them. Arlovsky or maybe like an Overeem or just somebody who's on that older side is now saying like, man, fuck, look how good the young cats are. I mean, that's what fucks with you.
Let's be honest. They're in their 40s.
Yeah, they're half their
20-year-olds coming in and these 40-year-olds. That's a huge age gap.
It's an enormous age gap. Both guys looked amazing. Doc has put out Olenek. Aspinall subbed Arlovsky. We didn't know he had that kind of grappling, and I was wondering if he got it to the ground, is that going to be a big liability? Still haven't seen him on his back, so we still don't like really, there's still some unanswered questions. But just absolutely fantastic from both of them. Absolutely fantastic. Heavyweight got some new blood this weekend, and I love to see it.
And they got new blood coming in this weekend, as you preluded with. Cyril Gane is making his return to the ring, to the cage. For those who haven't seen him, for you boxing fans, just imagine, what if Anthony Joshua did MMA? That's who this guy is. Phenomenal striking. Looks like a superhero. He looks
like Anthony Joshua. He looks a lot like Anthony Joshua.
Dude, it's crazy. And he's going against Rosenstruik, a guy who has phenomenal power, a phenomenal athlete, not really the best technique, even though he's a kickboxer. I feel like this is another one of those new blood rising versus the old veteran, which even do you call Rosenstruik a veteran? I feel like he's still kind of on the new side himself.
I feel like they view Gane as the guy, though. That's who they think is going to win, and that's who they want to win. Rosenstruik, he's done fine. He's very durable, I think. He hits hard enough, but at the same time, he's limited, right? He's another one of these cats at heavyweight who's just super limited. And that's really, I feel like, one of the last things you could say about Cyril Gane is that his heavyweight striking is limited.
Yeah.
He flows really well. He has beautiful combination work. He kicks well to both sides. He uses hands. He knocked out Dos Santos with a beautiful elbow. He's won by submission in the UFC by a heel hook. I don't think we're going to see that in this fight. He's got good size, right? He doesn't gas out that we've seen. Gane looks like the real deal. I've been pushing this guy since the first time I saw him as somebody everybody should be watching out for.
Love at first sight.
He very well, man, I love him. I absolutely do. 7-0.
Dana loves him even more.
Bro, 7-0, and this kid's something. He's going to be top 5 in no time, and I think he's going to be top 5 after he wins this fight.
Can you imagine the poster Ngannou versus Cyril Gane? That sells itself.
It's a big one. See, we say that, but what if Derek Lewis, like, you remember Derek Lewis and Ngannou? One of the worst
fights ever.
One of the worst fights of all time. And nobody's clamoring for a rematch. If you haven't seen it, I think combined there's 30 punches thrown in 15 minutes. That was rough. That was rough times, Daddy. Man, I really feel like Cyril Gane may end up being like almost like an Adesanya, where he comes in and his striking is so good that it's like, who the fuck is dealing with this? You know what I mean? We've never had to. Is he going to be like this Pedro Hizzo type who just comes in and puts giant dents in everybody's leg?
Can you imagine Gane versus John Jones? I don't think John does that fight.
I don't think John would love to take that fight. Here's what I want to know about John Jones coming up to heavyweight. How is his back? Because I know that he's had a lot of rumored back problems. And some of those can be for staying down in weight, by the way. If you don't come up in weight, your body can start to, not really agree with that and get fucked up long term. But is his back going to be able to let him wrestle? Because if not, it's a very different fight with Cyril Gane, right? Like that, people are talking about his fight with Adesanya. Well, it's like, is he going to be able to take him down? Because if he can, then it's a big issue. Because I don't think he was able to wrestle with Thiago Santos the way people assume that he was able to, and I don't think he was able to wrestle with Dominic Reyes.
I was going to say Dominic Reyes. That's a great example of how he's kind of slowed down a bit.
Even in those even in the last round when Dom can barely stand up, John isn't shooting. And John would love to get on top of motherfuckers. And that's where he's the best. That's where he got the nickname Bones. is being on top of dudes and ground and pounding the fuck out of them. You take a tired guy, you put him on his back, he's twice as tired because now he has to think about just getting the fuck up. There's nowhere he's safe. You know what I mean? Unless he could just hold close guard or some random bullshit like that. You know, I wonder about that for John. If he's not able to wrestle, no way he fights Cyril Gane. No way he wants to fight Cyril like that. Let
us know in the comment section what you think about Cyril Gane, but that's going to be a phenomenal fight. I'm highly looking forward to see how he performs because this is his first step-up fight. He's fought some good. I mean, Dos Santos a little bit past his prime, but Royce, you can say he's in his prime.
No, I think you're right. I think
this is a fantastic fight. Any other fight on this card that you're really looking forward to? Because it seemed kind of dry for me.
Okay, looking up and down it, I do like that I'm seeing Ankalaev again. He's fighting Nikita Krylov. I do expect Ankalaev to win. This kid is underrated. The Russian.
Oh, yes.
I don't know anything about him outside of the cage, to be honest. I'm trying to think of like things I can pepper in, but his counterboxing is just so fucking beautiful. His counterboxing's real good, and I'm really into it. Looking up and down it, Angela Hill is back. That's pretty good. Thiago Moises versus Alex Hernandez in the prelims. The main event prelim is very good.
That's a good fight.
Yes. Kuramagomedov versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Kuramagomedov was, I believe, featured on the Contender Series, but not signed. And he's now taking a 1 week, like, short notice fight. He won on the Contender Series, but he didn't get signed. And so I think he's probably coming in pretty hungry for this. And Alex Oliveira, I very much believe, is fighting for his job. So I could see that being a really like a motherfucker of a fight between those two.
You know, it's funny. I'm looking at the card on Wikipedia. I don't see Cowboy Oliveira on here. Do you know that fight?
His original opponent, Randy Brown, fell out like 2 days ago, and just today it got announced that he's facing Kuramagomedov.
Got it. Okay. That
Ramazan Kuramagomedov. Man, we were supposed to see fucking homeboy Heoni Barcelos on this card. The Puerto Rican cat who was just like crushing folks.
Dude, yeah.
Versus Jimmy Rivera is on this card. That's your people's main event.
Yeah, that's a good main event there. That's a good ass fight.
Main event. Pedro Munoz and Jimmy Rivera, two of the toughest guys at 135. Pedro Munoz, I believe his last fight was the 5-round Frankie Edgar war. Split decision. A lot of people thought that Pedro deserved the win there, but it is what it is. Jimmy Rivera hits real strong, grapples pretty well. Pedro Munoz, great with the hooks, great with the leg kicks, grapples pretty well. These two are pretty well-matched guys who are in the bottom half of that top 10 at 135, rather.
Damn, they're the bottom. I remember one time people thought Jimmy was the man. Like, he was like the next contender.
Well, Jimmy's still the man. 135 is just really fucking tough right now. You know what I mean?
In boxing and MMA, Teofimo Lopez, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, that weight class in both sports is just crushing right now.
They're both having a youth movement, right? We pointed out that there's some similarities between those two, and there's some similarities between how Russians kind of seem to be taking over, and Eastern Europeans seem to be taking over that like 205 cruiserweight kind of situation. Right? Or at least
that's that old Eddie Murphy joke, right? No, Chris Rock joke about like the more poverty, the more fighters come out of that place.
So, man, straight up. It's not a fucking. It's a joke based off some true shit.
Man, we also have some boxing this weekend that's going to be pretty dope.
Bro, we also have some kickboxing. We're not even going to talk about this, but I'm just going to say it. There's a kickboxing card that One FC is putting on. I think there might be an MMA fight or two on it. If y'all get a chance to watch Elias Anahachi, do it. If y'all get a chance to watch Giorgio Petrosian, absolutely you should do it. Giorgio Petrosian is one of the best. He's such a beast. I love that dude. Oh, and Rod Tang is fighting. Holy shit, there's a lot of good names on this card. Rod Tang. He's a very good Thai fighter from Thailand.
Okay.
Yeah, if you hear a Thailand guy who's just referred to by one name, like Super Lek or Rod Tang or, one of these guys, like he's fucking good.
Man, we have some great fights this weekend. One of them, I would say the biggest fight of the weekend is probably not the best. We have possibly the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Saul Canelo Alvarez, will be fighting against the 40-1 underdog from the World Boxing Super Series, Avni Yildirim.
The first round loser of the World Boxing Super Series, let's be clear. by knockout to Chris Eubank Jr., who I believe at the time we said, okay, he came in and knocked the guy out like he was supposed to. And I'll remind you, that was Chris Eubank Jr. Man, Jesse, first of all, you say supposed as if, or maybe number one pound for pound. Is anyone not putting Canelo as your pound for pound number one? Are we seeing that? Are there some?
Oh man, I don't know. You got to make a real big argument for Terrence
He's
Crawford.
number one. He's the guy. He did it. Especially after the Callum Smith fight, which some of us didn't think was going to happen. So Yildirim is, what belt does he hold? Do you remember? No, he's a mandatory for
for Canelo's belt.
Yes, I apologize. Somehow there's a guy who's fighting the number one pound for pound best guy on earth at boxing after having lost his last fight to Anthony Durrell, who's also fighting that night, by the way. And I feel like must just be sitting there like, where the fuck was my paycheck at? I thought I was going to,
And remember, he fought Anthony Durrell for a number one contendership fight to get a title, or I think for a belt, when he was also Yildirim coming from another loss at the World Boxing Super Series. So I don't know who he's paying off politically or who his manager is or his promotional team is, but they're doing a great job of putting him in the best position possible for him to succeed.
I mean, I don't want to say nothing, but he is Turkish, and it does seem like there's a Turkish fight fan who must just be paying millions of dollars. Did you see that fucking Ataman Izatar guy, the guy who got cut from the UFC because somebody snuck that weird bag of shit into his room in Dubai?
Yeah.
That guy got cut. That guy did not get cut. They're going to give him a second chance. And it's literally just like, okay, there must just be like a fucking, there's somebody paying off.
Dude, there's some fucking billionaires up in Turkey paying for these guys to get shot.
Like Erdogan or some shit. It's crazy. Anyway, yeah, Yildirim's going to get his ass whooped. We don't really need to pretend otherwise. Sometimes I try to come on here and be diplomatic because it's fighting and you never really know. But in this one, we really know. You could bet your child's soul on Canelo winning this fight. You know what I mean? I don't mean to overstate it, but that is absolutely true.
40-1.
40-1. It would be the biggest upset since what? Like Buster Douglas?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, straight up. You would be insane to bet any amount of money on this fight. This is all going to be so good to play back next week after he loses.
Luckily, they gave you a real fight as the co-main event. Eddie Reynoso's own Julio Cesar Martinez is fighting against the now veteran, the very durable Mick Williams Arroyo, who's moving down from super flyweight to challenge the flyweight champion, Julio Cesar Martinez.
I really haven't seen very much of Julio Cesar Martinez, Jesse. Can you talk this guy up for me? What are we looking at?
He's a phenomenal fighter. So Julio Cesar Martinez is a guy who a lot of people didn't know until he upset Charlie Edwards. So Charlie Edwards, big star in the UK. He was rising. He was trying to get his big title shot. And he fought against Julio Cesar Martinez and got his ass whooped in the UK in 3 rounds, got KO'd. Then people thought, hey, was that like a fluke? Is he really that good? So Christopher
that's listed as a no contest.
I think it might have gotten changed. Originally a KO, but it was ruled a no contest after Charlie.
But in the fight, he knocked him out.
Yeah, he dominated him. So he hit him when he was down, so it got changed to a no contest. But it's pretty clear who won that fight.
Sure. Fair enough.
So he came back. He beat a couple of good fighters. This is his next big name that he has on his list is Mick Williams Arroyo. Mick Williams Arroyo is a former world champion, an amateur standout. He's a guy who's only lost to the absolute best at super flyweight. So he's going to have the weight advantage coming into this fight, but he's not going to have the age advantage because I think Mick Williams now is in his 30s, while Julio Cesar Martinez is at a very ripe prime of his age of 26 years old. And how is the weight cut going to come into play about him losing the extra pound to come down in weight?
I agree. I also wonder, McWilliams, it's been a long time since we've seen him. It's been a long time since it's been over a year since he stepped into the ring. First time back, we've seen a lot of inactivity, come back and bite people. Did you say this fight's happening at flyweight, right?
It's happening at flyweight. He's moving down.
Yeah, he's moving down. So he should be a little bit bigger. Man, I don't know. I'm interested to see because, yeah, like you said, McWilliams Arroyo is a really tough guy and a really tough test, but he's not one you can't get over on, and especially with Julio Cesar Martinez being trained by Eddie Reynoso. I'm excited to see what that brings for sure.
All right, so McWilliams Arroyo is kind of more known for his losses, but he's got a phenomenal record. He's a former world champion, but he is the guy who challenged Not Ruinwrong, where we were like, oh, that guy's legit. And he also lost to Chocolatito Gonzalez in his U.S. expansion as he was becoming a name in the U.S.
This is factual, but he fought Ruinwrong real tough. I do remember that one.
He beat Quadras, though. He beat Carlos Quadras.
He beat Carlos Quadras. I believe the Ruinwrong fight, if it wasn't a majority decision, it might have been a split decision. That was a very close fight. That was a very close fight. So this is a guy who's on the level, but like A- on the level.
Yeah, and he's just below.
That would say a lot for Julio Cesar Martinez. So something I do like in these lighter weight classes, I feel like the guys just can't run from each other, right? Like the finances don't allow for it, basically.
Yeah.
If you're not fighting another top guy, basically who gives a shit?
The finance is definitely it. Like there really isn't anyone else. For people to give a fuck, you have to fight somebody.
Nuts.
I always tell people it's a little hard for people to get excited about a fighter when you see it's 112 pounds. The guy is 112 pounds.
I know dogs bigger than that. I mean, I'm not.
Girlfriend weighs more than that. Like,
I know children. They're like elementary schoolers who definitely weigh more than that.
I weighed 127 when I was 10.
And still. No, okay.
Man, so we actually
straight up. That's like child size.
You said what?
It's like child size. Instead of like flyweight, it should be called birth weight.
It's really small. I mean, I think he's 115, and then the weight class above is 118.
See, but then, people wonder why we have these weight classes. Like, why doesn't the UFC? If the UFC were to do 115, they couldn't find anybody for it. You could. You just have to go.
Fights at 115?
What?
The Karate Hottie fights at 115?
Male 115.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you just go to other places in the world. You just go to, you stock up on, guys from
Thai fighters.
Thai fighters. You stack up on, there's going to be some Japanese in the top 10. You know what I mean? Like, you can find these, every once in a while, like, oh, hey, there's a guy from Lagos or something. It's just like somebody will pop up. Hey, a Jamaican guy. Cool. You know what I mean? No, it's like we said, you go to a rough neighborhood, you find a lot of fighters. Well, if you go to a place where there's, not a lot of great nutrition, then you're going to find smaller fighters.
Yeah.
It's just the economics of it.
Man, speaking of the economics of this next fight is big. This should be the biggest fight of the weekend. Unfortunately, it is not. A guy that we talked a lot about and we said was a potential big superstar, Joseph Parker, returns to fight against the next big thing coming out of New Zealand. His former neighbor and former amateur rival, Junior Fa, the guy who beat him in the amateurs, he's finally caught up in the ranks where this is a big fight in Australia and in New Zealand and that whole Pacific area. It's going to be a phenomenal fight between Junior Fa and Joseph Parker. We're going to see who's going to move back up for another shot at the world class. How do you see this fight?
First of all, I don't remember calling Joseph Parker a potential star. I
called him a potential star. I said he moved like a welterweight, but he was a heavyweight. And then he had that weird fight against Anthony Joshua, where the referee did not let him do infighting.
That was insane. I was thinking about that the other week, how poorly. It was like an Italian referee, and he just did a horrible job. But he also dropped another one right after that. He fought Dillian White, lost to him, and so he's had to drop down to this continental level.
That was a close fight.
It was a close fight, but he lost to, close fight to not an A+ guy. You can lose a close fight to Anthony Joshua and not drop down too much. You lose a close fight
against Andy Ruiz.
He did. I was about to bring that up. He has good wins. He beat Hughie Fury, which is looking like a better and better win all the time. And he beat Andy Ruiz, and that's looking like a better win all the time. It did for at least 6 months. Problem is, he beat both those guys before anybody gave a shit. You know what I mean? Like, now a win over Hughie Fury would mean so much more. We understand so much better how tough he is. A win now, maybe, Carlos Takam's a bad example, but it's another one where people don't quite appreciate how fucking tough Carlos Takam is.
Dude, he's really good.
He's really good. Most of his best resume is just totally overlooked. And I think that's kind of the case here. I look at what Fa is bringing to the table, it's not anything on this resume that says to me he's going to be able to seriously contend with Joseph Parker.
Yeah, Fa had a great amateur record. Fa was the man of the amateurs. Fa beat Joseph Parker in the amateurs. They were neighbors. They went to the same church. They're from the same Samoan community. But since then, we've seen Joseph Parker go to the world level, go international, have the big fights, and we've seen a very slow Fa buildup. So I feel like this is one of those cases that what you were in the amateurs versus how you guys compete in the pros is going to be a lot different. But you do have that one little asterisk of, is this going to be kind of like a Shane Mosley versus Vernon Forrest situation where you are the better pro, but I have your number?
Could be. It very well could be. There's always mental games. It would shock you, the jiu-jitsu guys I've seen beat other jiu-jitsu guys, and then you find out, oh, well, that guy started rolling with him when that guy just started out. And so he's always in his head that he was going to smash. Like, I'm talking about some of the best jiu-jitsu guys of all time. I've seen choked like totally unconscious by guys who you're like, him? He's okay, I guess. It's crazy. But then if somebody's stuck in your head, then there can be a boogeyman effect for sure. Until you see it, you can't call that, though. You can't call it there's going to be a boogeyman effect. And it is possible, but having already seen Joseph Parker go through some really difficult mental situations, prepare to fight the toughest guys in the world, and then look good doing it and put forward a decent performance against the best, that shows a mental toughness that's a little difficult to see replicating. You know what I mean? There's a reason we have to go all the way back to Shane Mosley and Vernon White to find an example of that. And that's because it just doesn't happen particularly often, even when these guys are sparring partners and training partners like that.
I just saw a message come in. They said that this fight is a good fight, but can't contend versus Tim Tszyu versus Hogan.
Your favorite. You're so weirdly up on like Australian boxing, but then I'm like, hey, did you see there was a fire down the street? And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
you're not a Hogan believer? What's his first name again? He lost to Charlo. Dennis Hogan. I was going to call him Patrick Hogan. I don't know why. Dennis Hogan,
like
man.
6 Irish names. Just fucking spin the wheel.
Man, yeah, I love the fact that New Zealand and Australia are really coming up in MMA and boxing.
And jiu-jitsu.
And jiu-jitsu. It reminds me of what the British scene was maybe like 10 years ago. Right after Ricky Hatton and Amir Khan had done their thing. The kids that grew up watching them, the teenagers, the young adults, are now
they're growing up. Now they're growing up to lose to their step-ups and gatekeepers when they finally reach the world level.
And I mean,
that does seem to happen with plenty of. Let's keep an eye on that, because we've seen a few too many British fighters, I feel like, in the last year, have a difficult step-up or a difficult gatekeeper fight that we were not anticipating. So I'm keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, I keep an eye on it. As long as that Irish mobster keeps funding some of like the Irish fighters, I'm down.
So let's put a bow on this. Do you see Joseph Parker or Junior Fa?
Man, I got to go Parker because he's been the better professional. But you always got to keep an eye on who beat you in the amateurs. Who was the guy who had your number?
I agree. It's interesting. It's definitely a wrinkle to the fight. Jesse, did you see that Daniel Kinahan documentary?
Yes, I did.
What'd you think? It was a good documentary, right?
Great documentary. Phenomenal documentary. But I'm not surprised. I mean, we've seen it in every sport. So, for example, Pablo Escobar was a huge soccer fan. So he invested a lot of money in the inner cities of Colombia. And then when those kids grew up, they had a phenomenal soccer scene, the best team ever. We saw the same thing with Mexico. We've seen the same thing with Japan when the Yakuza really liked MMA. We saw a lot of Japanese stars dominate in like Pride and K1. It happens. It's what happens.
Russia, straight up. Vladimir Putin, enormous fan of judo. If you're a good judoka, you're going to live so fucking good in Russia. You know what I mean? Like for the rest of your life. Wrestling, same idea. You know, it's important to the culture that you go and do well if you're representing the nation in wrestling. Even though there's some weird politics around like,
Phenomenal
It's crazy. You
documentary.
start to learn about because if we were to say what's the toughest region in Russia,
Dagestan.
Not everybody in Russia really rocks with Dagestan like that and really considers them like representative. It's almost like America and Puerto Rico in a way. It's not the same. It's just like trying to put the idea in your head.
I used to talk to this Russian girl, and she told me Dagestan is like the hood.
Yes,
it's very from Dagestan. It's like saying, "Oh, that dude's straight out of Compton." Like they view you like that.
There's something to that. There's an othering, right? It's like it's not quite us, right? When we talk about Dagestan, so it's almost one of those places where I wonder, like, in our lifetime, are we going to see Dagestan as its own nation?
Yeah,
which would be fucking cool for like the Olympics
or like the emperor. He's got like a Genghis Khan type robe going on.
Literally, no, it would just be decided in combat every year. It would be like one of those big like Star Trek things. Guys have two big knives like on the sides of their arms, and just that's the primary. Everybody getting the death pit.
I think it was back in the day. It was like, I'm the leader because can you whoop my ass?
Yeah, exactly. Literally.
And then some small guy decided, he was like, have you heard of God?
Yeah, he actually said it's cool if I run stuff and also I get to fuck your wife.
All right, with that said, that's the end of the week.
The Kinahan documentary. Any takeaways before we close out?
Any takeaways? I feel like you can't fault Tyson Fury. They were like, should fighters do more research on the people who are like managing them and give them advice? No, that's not your job. It's the job of like the sanctioning bodies and the governing bodies to keep these people out.
I agree totally. And that's exactly the point I was hoping you were going to make. I was going to make it if you didn't. It's not on Billy Joe Saunders. It's not on, because guess what? Like we said, a lot of these guys are not coming from the best areas. A lot of them don't get, nobody's getting into either boxing or rocket science for the most part. That's a very small lap over, right? Usually people get into boxing because they don't have a lot of any other options. And so it's definitely unfair to put it onto those guys. They just happen to be the ones whose names you recognize.
It's kind of similar to like if you grow up in a nice neighborhood, then you can promote your music at your friend's bar. Or you can go and have like your friend promote you at like his chain of stores. You have those access. If you live in the hood, like Tyson Fury and all those guys, the only people you know who have money are drug dealers.
Yes.
That's your only people who can sponsor you to make sure that you have the training that you need, the nutrition you need, are like the gangsters and the mobsters. It's a sad situation, but if you're going to go ask someone to sponsor you, those are your access. That's your network.
Well, and also those are the guys trying to get close to you because those are the people, and we hear it with the Kadyrov guy who's very active in the Ukraine and Russia. That these are people who want to be close to fighters because it makes them feel tough.
Yeah,
and there's a premium on that in that world, whether you're in arms dealing or drug dealing or something that's illicit. Being surrounded by really tough motherfuckers makes you feel and look like a tougher motherfucker. And so a lot of these guys are like, yeah, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fucking, people do it all the time. How many people go get a photo next to a UFC fighter with the fist up, looking as tough as they can? It always looks a little, little cringy, but they do it because it looks tough and it feels tough to do it. Right. And this is the same thing. They just have millions of dollars to do it with, and they have an intention to do a lot of it. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's the only part of the documentary that I wish was not in there, was them asking questions about the fighters. That was unfair.
Man, great documentary. Check it out on YouTube. Follow me, social media, Jay Rivas Comedy on Instagram. Some of the best memes on the planet. Go to my stories. Jay Rivas on Facebook. Fucking follow my fucking Instagram. Fucking follow my Instagram.
Jesse, do we have a show that people should find and subscribe to or anything like that?
Yes. Like and subscribe us on iTunes, Fighters Block on iTunes. Also, like and subscribe our page on Facebook, Fighters Block on Facebook.
There. And find me on Twitter, Joe at Fanatics. And man, amazing. Great stuff.
Peace out.